Russian history is fascinating. They're survivors. They're smart. They're ingenious. They're manipulative when they have to be. And the cops would say to me, "Hey, Joe, if you want prostitutes, just let me know. We'll get some for you." You know, in Russia, it's totally normal. I bribed, I don't know how many people, even the guy on the street. You get pulled over by a cop, you're going to bribe him, right? He's not even going to offer me a ticket. The FBI said, "Oh yeah, we're going to play good cop, bad cop, and we'll interrogate them." I'm just like, you know what? Just stop, because that's not the way to talk to these guys. There's no way they're going to be more scared of you than they were of the KGB. There's nothing about American prisons that's going to be even remotely close to the conditions that they had over there. So you're not scaring them.
Bogatin told me that exactly. And he said, "Michael, I ain't afraid of anything. Well, nothing that they can do here in the United States that wouldn't be 10 times easier than what we had back in Russia."
We don't know how they work. We don't have Russian mentality. We don't know what it's like to get invaded for hundreds of years. And if you think you're going to pull a fast one on them, it ain't going to happen.
I think the Mexican mafia and the Russian mafia are more alike than we were here in America, Cosa Nostra, because... Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end, my friends. And as always, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to our God for that. Got a special guest today, but want to ask you all something. I've been thinking about every Monday, or as many Mondays as I can make it happen when I'm not traveling. I'm going to be doing a Ministry Monday because I just want to share more of my faith and gospel with all of you. So I would appreciate it if you put it in the comments that you would like me to do that. It will most likely be a live. Maybe we'll re-record it. I don't know. But wanted to run that past you. Please comment if you think you'd like that to happen. I certainly have a heart to do that, so let me know. Today I have a very interesting guest. His name is Joe Ciro, and he is a really expert on the Russian mob and Russian culture in general. He worked with the CIA. He spent about 10 years in Russia during the 80s and the 90s. And it's really a fascinating conversation because I was involved with Russian guys that were Russian mobsters. And again, they're a loosely knit organization, some of them. Now, there's some real hardcore section of the Russian mob that are more hardcore than we were, certainly here in the Cosa Nostra, meaning this. Number one, in order to be involved with that section, you had to first go to prison, had to be in prison. You had to forego any kind of contact whatsoever with anything legitimate. You couldn't pay your taxes. You couldn't even talk to a cop. You had to forego anything. You couldn't get a legitimate job. You had to work as a criminal, period. That was it. Obviously, you can never betray, the oath that you take. You had to disassociate yourself from your family. The family first was the mafia there. You had to disassociate yourself with your legitimate family, your real family. Very, very hardcore. Whether they kept that, intact, and whether they really followed that strict policy, strict rules, I don't know. I didn't experience that with the Russians here. But I will say that we're going to talk about a comparison between the Russian mob, Italian Cosa Nostra here in the United States, and the Mexican mafia. And you're going to see whether there's similarities or differences or whatever. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Russian culture. We even got into socialism a little bit. I think that people might be interested in here. But he's a fascinating guy, very knowledgeable. He wrote a couple of books. He really knows the Russian culture well. You know what, people? I don't know it well. I mean, I had certain, perceptions about Russia from what we hear here in the United States. But, you really got to travel there and understand how different they are. It's the same with China. Joe gets into this a little bit. The same with Iran. Places that we can't even imagine if we haven't been there and experienced the culture. And Joe's going to give us some good insight into that. It was very, very interesting conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it. So if you're into any kind of mob at all, this is it. My friends, I want to talk to you about the base camp training that's going to take place in June of 2026. It's a summit. But before I get into that, I need to tell you about something. I had a gentleman on the show last week who was telling me about a guy named Henry from New York who did something that at first I thought it sounded just a little bit too familiar. You know what I mean? You see, Henry turned 20 grand into $150,000 in 6 months. And I thought, Henry, New York, multiplying that by a factor of 7, yeah. It smelled like a Mafia playbook to me. But I dug a little deeper and I found out he's the real deal. You see, Henry learned a skill called trading, and he learned it from some guys who came out of the hedge fund world who are now teaching this skill to everyday Americans. The company, it's called Basecamp Trading, and even though they have hundreds of 5-star reviews online, hundreds, I mean that, I like to find out for myself if outfits like this are running some sort of a scam or if they're the real deal. So I invited the founder of the company, his name is Drew Day, onto my show, and we had a very fascinating conversation. I found out we had a lot in common. He walked away from a very lucrative but a very dark world also and is now using his powers for good. His company is hosting a special live training this week called the 7-Minute Income Summit, where they're going to show you how to potentially generate consistent monthly income through trading without taking big risks or sitting in front of your computer all day like I know so many of you do. Now, I plan to attend myself because I'm a big believer in having multiple streams of income. And trading the right way can be a great vehicle for that. So to claim your free ticket, simply go to 7, that's the number 7, go to 7minutetrade.com to sign up. That's 7minutetrade.com. We'll also put the link below in the description. If you want a better future, you got to invest in yourself, so go check it out. I guarantee you won't regret it. We're going to talk about the Russian mob, La Cosa Nostra, and of course the Mexican Mafia. So with no further delay, here's my very special guest, Joe Ciro.
So, it's interesting you bring up the thing about violence because in the 90s, a lot of violence because everything was up for grabs, right? Soviet society collapsed. Now you've got not just your regular criminality, you got furniture, cars, like every aspect, every angle of the economy, oil refineries, railroad, everything is up for grabs. So these KGB businessmen, Communist Party, people from the Soviet era now would use the organized crime groups to do their bidding, right? So the big businessmen and big KGB had their own crime groups to do, their muscle, right? When it wasn't appropriate for them to use KGB. And then, so in the 90s, we had lots of violence. But after around 2010, 2015, I had some friends in Houston who worked with Houston Police Department, investigated La M and Mexican Mafia. And they said, look, man, we used to investigate the Russians and we believe that they were the most violent on earth. And, they're not going to just go after you. They're going to go after you and your wife and your kids and everything else. And then we started investigating the Mexicans. And we thought, the Russians aren't that big deal compared to what we've seen the Mexicans do. So I think there's a lot of it that has to do with perspective and kind of where you're sitting, because somebody who goes to Russia in 2015 is going to have a totally different set of stories that I did in 1986. And it's a totally different place, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I never really put much credence in the, who's more violent, who's not violent. You know what? And I'm betting that this was the case with you guys in New York and other places in the States. When you had to get violent, you got violent. If you didn't have to get violent, don't get violent because it's bad for business. And, and if business is the bottom line, why am I scaring people away? And why am I beating up people or killing people who are making money for me unless they were somehow interfering with making money?
Well, Joe, you're so right about that, and it's really law enforcement and the media that had us here in the States like we were violent, we were killing people all the time. And, it wasn't that way. I mean, it was a last resort. Some guys, like you get a Roy DeMeo or a Greg Scarpa, guys like that, maybe that was their first course of action, but they were the exception, not the rule, because you don't want to bring heat like that. So, but the media and the government obviously plays it up that we were the worst people in the world. But, something very interesting, they always claim the Russian mob was so violent and we were violent here. And then you get the Mexican Mafia. I think the Mexican Mafia and the Russian Mafia are more alike than we were here in America, Cosa Nostra, because like you just said, you enlightened me about the Russian Mafia being intertwined with the government in the city. It's the same with the Mexican Mafia. Mexican Mafia has tremendous control. They're their own government practically, really.
Yeah.
I mean, they have artillery. They can fight the government. I guess the Russian Mafia doesn't have to do that because they're closely intertwined and they have a lot of control. We were influential. we didn't have that kind of power. We could never fight the government. The proof of the pudding is that they destroyed us with the RICO Act. When they were ready to do it, they took us out. Bottom line. I mean, we're not nearly as effective today as we were during my time. So I think, the comparison between the Mexican mob, the power that they have, and the Russian mob is really something to be compared, not with us. Maybe in Italy it's a bit different, but still not to the extent that either the Russian or the Mexicans, the control that they have. That's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know what the funny thing? I was in Europe and a documentary came on TV. It was a documentary about Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, and they're talking about corruption, bribes, gangs, cartels, whatever. And the predominant thought I had was, you know what? You can just take out the word Mexico and put in the word Russia. And we bribe people. I bribed, I don't know how many people, because even the guy on the street, you get pulled over by a cop, you're going to bribe him. I'm not getting a ticket, right? He's not even going to offer me a ticket. You prepare your wallet, you prepare your license, you prepare your cash, you stick it in, you hand it over. He goes back to his car. He does the whole, the whole scene, right? The whole, Hollywood drama of, taking his time in his car to check you out, whatever. It's all nonsense. He comes back, hands me back my license, my wallet. The money, of course, is gone. He gives you a salute. Be on your way. Thank you very much. And look, man, I had to pay bribes to get into empty restaurants. I had to pay bribes to get into places that it just didn't make sense, right? From an American perspective, didn't make any sense at all. We paid bribes to go to the dentist, to cut the line at the dentist, cut the line at the hospital, cut the line. If you could cut a line and you had the money to cut a line, cut the line. If you get pulled over by cops, you got the money to pay a cop, pay the cop. Because they'll tell you, you know what? If you don't pay me and I take you into the precinct, you're just going to pay more to the boss. So just pay me the couple of bucks I'm asking for you out here on the street and save yourself paying a lot more by going inside, The whole system was like that. Everything from top to bottom. So when you're 9 years old, you already know. One of the guys who worked for me in Moscow, who was KGB, he said, "Look, we get this with our mother's milk."
Wow.
By the time you're 9 years old, you understand that you're paying bribes. You understand corruption. You understand that all this stuff is happening. And you can go your entire life in the United States. If you're not in the restaurant business in New York, you're not going to know anything about bribes. But if you're going to open a restaurant in New York, you might know something about bribes.
Exactly.
It's like you can avoid the whole thing if you're in a normal, whatever, typical American, growing up, going to school, getting a job. You'll never come across any of this stuff. In Russia, you came across it every single day.
Yeah, and it's the same in Mexico to a great degree, really. It's how the system operates there. Really crazy thinking about it. Let me ask you, so when you went back in 2019 to Russia, was it the same or had it changed a lot?
No, it changed a lot. So Moscow, on those trips, I was just in Moscow, changed a lot. I could count on one hand the number of Russian-made vehicles that I saw on the streets. Previously, it was all Russian vehicles, right? Russia made their own cars. Then you see Porsches and Volkswagens and Jaguars and Rolls Royces and, Chevys and whatever in 2019. They had, some kind of middle class was developing. I'm sure that's taken a huge hit in especially the last year or two. But yeah, you had a thriving, at least in Moscow, places like that, big cities, you had thriving businesses. And that's what my friends were talking about. They said, look, man, this isn't going to last. These guys are going to crush it all. Putin's going to get greedy. He's going to control all this, and it'll all go away when Russia starts acting like Russia again. When Russia acts like a capitalist country, it lasts for a few years, and then the heavy hand comes down again. And, and historically, all through Russia, Russian history and Soviet history, same thing. They have a couple of years where things loosen up, people start making money, private business, and then something happens and the state reacts and they start clamping down. And it's been going like that for 500 years.
Yeah.
But it was fun. In 2019, it was fun.
Let me ask you, got any crazy stories of your time in the Soviet Union? Quick question, everyone. How much control do you have over your money right now? Technology, it's changed everything, and now it's changing how your money works. Crypto started as a niche, but now it's going mainstream. You got faster payments, you got more control, you got fewer middlemen, and this isn't just hype. It's just where things are going. And getting started today, it's easier than you think. With Rumble Wallet, you can buy Bitcoin, hold dollar-backed stable coins, even own digital gold backed by real gold, all in one place. It's a non-custodial crypto wallet, which means you, not a bank or a platform, control access to your funds. The setup is very simple. It connects with MoonPay, so you can use your debit card, your credit card, or your bank account, and you can be set up and running in minutes. And for a limited time, you can start your wallet with just $10 in US stablecoin by downloading the Rumble wallet and entering my exclusive promo code INNERCIRCLE10 when you sign up right now. You can even use your Rumble wallet to support your favorite Rumble creators like me, and you can do that directly. So do this now. Scan the QR code, click the link in the description, or go to wallet.rumble.com/innercircle and download the Rumble wallet. From there, you can set up your wallet, enter promo code INNERCIRCLE10 to get your $10 in US stablecoin. And remember, this is a limited time offer, so you got to act now. Take control of your money. Get started with Rumble Wallet today. And remember this, terms and conditions apply. See the description below or visit rumble.com/promo official rules for all the details. This is an offer you shouldn't refuse. Protect your money.
You know, I don't even know what crazy is anymore, because when people read my book, Vodka Hookers and the Russian Mafia, they would tell me, "Oh, it was so ridiculous when you did this and this." I was like, man, that was just another day in Russia, right? So just a tiny. So I'll tell you one little ridiculous thing. When you're driving your car, back then, when you're driving your car and it starts raining, you see all these cars pull over to the side, and they open their doors. They take their windshield wipers out of the pocket in their doors and clip them on. Because if they're not on, because if you leave them on, they're going to get stolen, right? Everything gets stolen, everything. So we were running people to the airport in the middle of the night under armed guards to get them out of the country. Foreign businessmen who were being threatened by the local mafia group. We had a French woman who was working for a French advertising firm who, was telling us about the Russian guy who was assaulting her and following her and stalking her. And it turned out that it was totally the Russian guy who was the victim, and the French woman was stalking the Russian guy. We had a Russian who worked for a German company, and the Russian was the accountant, and he had access to all their bank accounts. And the Russian accountant disappears, and they're worried that he left, he stole their money, whatever. And so they hired us to find him, and we found him. We found him cut into I don't know how many pieces, stuffed under floorboards in the apartment. This guy had a wife and kids. We found him in the apartment of his gay lover. And, that was just another day in the life. I don't know, man. There's so many stories. It's just one after another. It's crazy.
I can tell. I could tell you what I remember, Joe. They really know how to party, because every Wednesday night we would go to Brighton Beach, and they had one of their clubs there, and we would all go, my guys and their guys. And I'll never forget the most impressive thing. They brought out trays of lobster. I mean, it must have been stacked this high. And obviously they had the vodka and they had the girls. And we always had a great time. We look forward to going there because they just knew how to party. They had a lot of fun.
So in 1990, so I was going over there to be left. My boss, a couple other people, head of the Chicago Police Department. We all went over there for like one of these delegation, a week or two, cop to cop kind of thing. And they were leaving me behind and they were going to go home. So one night we're at this party, and you know what a Russian party looks like? The entire table is covered.
Yes.
It's got fruit, it's got vegetables,
Everything.
it's got meat, it's got bottles, bottles, bottles. It's, and you're going to go all night. And these guys are going to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, fresh as a daisy, and you're going to be absolutely hammered. And I went to this meeting. It was the only meeting we had in this one city we were in. And we were with the general of the police for that region and my boss and head of the Chicago Police Department and somebody from a computer company and all this. And it went toast, 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 toast. I lost track after like a dozen. I
Yeah.
can't do a dozen shots, man. It's just, so I was down for the count. We had one meeting the next morning, the whole visit, and I couldn't make it. I couldn't move. I couldn't get out of bed. And that happened all the time. One time I was with Russian cops in New Mexico. I used to run a program for international cops, this international law enforcement academy. And when they had Russians come over, I would go over, I would do a class, I'd do the class in Russian. And then these guys said, hey, where are you staying? And I made the mistake of telling them. They said, oh, it's the same hotel as us. Okay, it's 7 o'clock. You come to our room. I was like, oh, shit, here we go. At 7 o'clock on the nose, they're banging on my door. So somehow they found out which room I'm staying in. And they said, come on, let's go. You come with us. I go down to their room. They set up they grab tables from other rooms, set up this huge thing. And in an hour and a half, I did 15 shots. And I was just wrecked. And that was normal. What you experienced, what I experienced, totally normal on a regular basis, all the time.
Yeah, it was
That's
for
why,
them. It was like drinking milk or water. I mean, it didn't affect them. I remember.
That's why even those stories, like of all the vodka and all the partying, and the cops would say to me, hey, Joe, if you want prostitutes, just let me know. We'll get some for you. Anything you wanted. To me, that's not even out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
It's just normal. In Russia, it's totally normal.
Well, I told you, it had a sad ending with me, my relationship with these guys, because when I was going off to prison, I'll tell you what happened, Joe. I told my boss at the time, I said, listen, these guys are not punks. They're men. They need to be treated like men. I says, and every week they're going to bring you money. Every week. They don't fail. They'll bring you money. I said, but treat them right. I said, I had a great relationship with them. Once in a while we had, a few words, but nothing major. But when I went to the three, I went to Markowitz and Bogatin, and I said, listen, I'm going to jail. This is how it happens now. You're going to have to answer and talk with somebody else. And I'll never forget, Markowitz said, no, Mr. Michael, we only want to deal with you. I said, it doesn't work that way. You're going to have to do what you got to do. I said, but everything's going to be okay, right? I went off to prison. I don't know exactly what happened, but within 3 months, the whole thing went sour with them. Markowitz, from what I understand, was starting to cooperate with the government. I don't know how that happened, because with me, there was never a problem with him. They ended up killing Markowitz. They went after Lev Persich. They put him in a wheelchair. They shot him up a couple of times. Somehow he survived. And the best guy, Bogatin, ran away. And he was in Poland. And from what I understand, he was extradited, because they indicted him here on the gas stuff. He was extradited from Poland. He was the first guy extradited from Poland in like 29 years or something. And then I lost track of him. I tried to get in touch with him again, but I could never find him, because he was a good guy. And I'll be honest, we had some things together that I was hoping that I'd be able to recover when I came out, but I was never able to get a hold of him.
When in the 90s, when these guys, let me back up. So I got to work in the Organized Crime Control Department because the general over there, who I ended up becoming very close with, my father passed away in January of 89, and I met this guy in August of 89, and his son died when he was 17 years old. So we just kind of fit, And so he was looking after me, and he said, look, we want to do this relationship because our mafia problem, our Russian mafia problem is going to be your Russian mafia problem. That's why I want to talk to you guys. And the FBI refused, and they didn't trust him, and they said he's KGB, which he wasn't, and all this BS. But when the Russians started coming here and getting a lot more active in the late 80s and 90s, the FBI said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna play good cop, bad cop, and we'll turn the screws on these guys, and we'll interrogate them." And just like, you know what? Just stop, because that's not the way to talk to these guys. There's no way they're going to be more scared of you than they were of the KGB. There's nothing about American prisons that's going to be even remotely close to the conditions that they had over there. So you're not scaring them. You know what you do if you're going to interview or interrogate a Russian gangster, thug, criminal, whatever? Bring him a Coke, bring him a burger, let him relax. He'll start talking. He'll tell you a bunch of lies, and that's your job. You got to figure out what's true and what's not. But when I did a movie inside of Russian prisons for A&E, and one of the inmates that we interviewed, he said, "Look, here's the way this works. Like I mentioned earlier, be a human being and respect people and respect the rules, and do what you got to do, and know who you're dealing with. If you're going to bow up to a made man, a gangster, a vor, one of these major mobster guys, you're making a huge mistake, because that's not how it works. And if you're the FBI and you come in and say, I'm going to knock heads with these guys, they're not going to help you. They're not going to cooperate. They're not going to talk, because you don't scare them at all. Because the conditions, we went inside Russian prisons, went inside camps. We went inside that prison where, you remember the old Gary Powers, who was shot down over the Soviet Union in the 1960s. Yeah. We went to the prison where he was held. They took me to his prison cell. These places are not kindergarten. These places are serious places, And Russians come in the United States, they don't care. They don't care about doing time here. At least back then, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, they did not care at all about doing time here.
No, it's funny you say that, because Bogatin told me that exactly. I think he did 3 years. And he said, Mike, I ain't afraid of anything over here. He said, there's nothing that they can do here in the United States that wouldn't be 10 times easier than what we had back in Russia. So, you're so right on about that, really.
The funny thing, the thing that I noticed, I lived in China for a while. I've been all over Europe. And as you move from the United States to Europe, okay, a little bit of difference. You move to Central Europe, it starts getting different. Yeah. You move into Russia, and that territory it's a different world, different mindset, different perspective on how you do things. And then you move into China, and that's a totally different planet. And Americans don't get it. Like, the thing I say, is like the two best things and the two worst things that ever happened to the United States was the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Because it was great, because it kept us from all the wars, right? All the European wars, all that stuff. We didn't have to suffer any of that. But it also means we don't know how they work. We don't know. We don't have 1,000 years of history. We don't have mentality. We don't have Russian mentality. We don't know what it's like to get invaded for hundreds of years. And we're like the children. We're the kids of the world. We're the immature, young, juvenile kids on the block. And the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese, they've been around a long time, man. If you think you're going to pull a fast one on them, it ain't going to happen.
You're so right, Joe. I've traveled everywhere too, and I got a little taste of it, probably not near what you've gotten. But let me ask you, what would you say to people today that, all of a sudden we have a socialist mayor in New York, we have a socialist mayor in Portland, we have a socialist running for mayor in Los Angeles now also with that election. I don't know how that turned out. Spencer Pratt got ousted there, but what would you say to people, because you've experienced Russia, you know what it is to live there. What would you say to people that are, championing this socialist cause right now?
Yeah, the first sentence that always comes to my mind is, you have no idea what you're talking about. Because if you're looking at the kind of socialism that creates lines and creates scarcity of products and I hear way too many people saying, yeah, I'd be happy if they just paid me $5,000 a month and they took over everything in my life, to have the state run the place. So no, you don't want that. You really don't want that. Like, it's convenient, it's easy, it's lazy, but you have no idea what you're going to get rid of. You're going to get rid of the freedom to talk. When I went to the Soviet Union in 1986, 80, I was there 86, 87, 89, off and on. And the first trips I took there, people said, look, when you come into our building, do not speak a word of English. And don't talk at all until you get inside of our apartments and the door is shut and locked. Why? Because some nosy neighbor looking through the peephole is going to hear you speak English. They're going to call somebody. They're going to call the local cops. They're going to call KGB and say so-and-so across the hall has a foreigner in their apartment. And that's when crap starts, right? And if you want the middle class to collapse, and if you want to pay bribes for everything you do, remember that scandal thing where this who was some actress paid a bribe at Harvard to get her kid in, something like that.
Yeah. Oh,
4, 5, 6 years ago, whatever.
Yeah, it was
okay?
a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now imagine the whole system running like that.
Hmm.
So in Russia, I had a friend who was a professor. She would charge $10,000 and she would write your PhD dissertation for you. Right now,
Yeah.
So you want socialism? Everything, number one, quality is going to go down the toilet. Number two, if you're really heading in that direction, then the state isn't going to care about what consumers want, especially if they, let's assume they take over elections, whoever it is, and elections don't really matter that much here anymore. Then why do I care what you want? As a consumer, why do I care what you want? You're not going to elect me out of office.
Right.
So what? There's no food on the shelves. I don't care. The only thing that I do want is I want somebody, some sector that's going to come in and deal with, number one, crime, number two, teachers, education, number three, economy, maybe not in that order, and make it possible for people to make money without somebody digging deeper in their pocket. I want my grandmother to be able to walk down the street. I want safe neighborhoods, and I don't care, honestly, whether you call it Republican or Democratic, I don't want either one of them, all on the dole. They're all corrupt. They're all ripping off the place. Why? Because that hurts everybody. I don't want that shit. I want people to do their job, and I want them to use our tax money. No, I don't want corporations taking over the whole place, because socialism, definitely don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
But the corporate oligarchy, honestly, I don't want that either. Just leave me alone. Don't control all my digital. My friend calls it digital gulag. Yeah, you want to go to prison? You don't have to go to prison anymore, Michael. All I have to do is cut off your digital.
Yeah.
Cut off your credit card, cut off your Apple Pay, cut off your social media, and I got you.
That's true.
That's
true.
the thing I'm afraid of. The two things I'm afraid of, okay? One is the socialism piece you're talking about. And the other is the Big Brother hyper digital environment like you have in China, where they can cut off all of your, if you don't have a social score that's high enough, they can start manipulating all your stuff.
Yeah, well, they did it in Iran. They cut off all social media, from what I understand, right? All the
cut off the internet
access. Yeah.
You know how easy it is to cut off the internet?
Yeah.
Really
easy.
What? And so, when Russia was bombing Ukraine over the last couple of years, Russian friends of mine would send me emails with pictures, with stills of the news footage that they were showing in Russia. And then we were getting shots of places that were being bombed. So we were seeing the places that were being bombed. Russian media was showing those same places before the bombing, as if nothing happened. And they're saying, hey, what's the big deal? Everything's fine here, because they're not showing them what's really going on.
Yeah.
We're already deep into that. I mean, look at all this. You don't know what's true. You don't know what's real. You don't know if that person was really at that meeting or really shot that video. Honestly, I'll tell you, I'm glad I'm not 20.
I feel the same way, Joe.
I'm happy to be over 60.
Are you surprised that the Russian-Ukraine war is going on this long? I mean, didn't I think we all had the perception that Russia was going to walk in there and they're going to do their job, and this was going to be a quick victory for them, and we're going on what, 4 years now?
Yeah, not surprised at all.
No?
Not surprised at all because the Russian way of doing things is typically um, kiss up the chain. Uh, Competence is not an issue. Like there's so many that are not competent. If you have soldiers who get injured in the field and the medics and the doctors come to help them, and the doctor says, how much money you have? You got to pay me before I help you. What kind of soldiers are you going to have then?
Mm.
You know, no, the whole place is rotten. It's rotten to the core, as far as I'm concerned. I love Russian people. Russian history is fascinating. They're survivors. They're smart. They're ingenious. They're manipulative when they have to be. They're all kinds of things that history has required them to be. But in a lot of ways, the place is rotten to the core. Like they just can't. The politics don't allow them to be hyper disciplined and well equipped and all the rest of it. And they're their own worst enemy. And so, no, I'm not surprised by much of any of this.
What do you think's going to happen? I mean, how long do you think this is going to continue? I mean,
Yeah. Hard to say. Whatever your source of information is saying, right? Who are you listening to? Do they have the right, angle, perspective? I think Putin's going to lose. I think he's going to get run out. Um,
mm,
I think Ukraine's going to pull through, but look, people wave a flag and say, "Oh, Ukraine's fighting for democracy and all that." It's like, all right, maybe, but you know what? A country like that does not leave the Soviet Union and not be corrupt and not
right,
have the same system that they had, right? So this isn't angels against devils. It's not
right.
that the Ukrainians are all angels and Russians are all devils. So, but I think they're going to pull it out unless something dramatic happens. You see what they're doing in Moscow, bombing factories, bombing refineries. Coming to the heart of the empire. They're running the Russians out of Crimea, supposedly. The Russians didn't have the stomach for this from day one, and I don't think they're going to pull it off.
Crazy, yeah. Going into it, like I said, we all thought this would be a quick victory for Russia and Ukraine was going to collapse, but man, they surprised everybody. But, then the other thought was, would Putin ever, push the nuclear button? I never thought he would, but who knows?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, you hope he doesn't. He's getting up there. His health isn't great. But, the one thing we always say is Putin leaves the scene. You don't know who the guy behind him is. The
Exactly.
guy behind him is going to be 10 times worse, like we're seeing in this Iranian thing. They knocked off the father. Well, the son's worse.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
be careful what you pray for.
No, you're right. Well, Joe, this was fascinating, and I'm sure my viewers appreciate getting some insight into Russian organized crime and also into Russia itself. So really appreciate it. And going to post your books, I'm sure they're fascinating books, and everybody should pick one up. Russia itself is just, it's fascinating. It's always been to me. And I was thinking of visiting there. I got actually a friend that was over there not too long ago, and he had good things to say about what's going on there. He really did. I guess it's, like I said, different now. But I guess, when you go there, you're just fascinated by the culture. It's so different than anything we've experienced here.
Yeah, and if you get the chance, and you can go under pretty safe conditions and all that, do
Yeah.
it. It's an amazing
Yeah.
place.
Will do. All right, people. Well, there you have it. It's fascinating, to learn about different things. I talked a lot about my relationship with the Russians that I knew. Had a very good relationship with them. They were my best business partners on the street, no doubt. We made a lot of money together. We were together for almost 8 years in the gas business, making $1 million a week, millions of dollars a week, I should say. And it was sad the way it ended. One of them got killed. The other one was shot up, and the best one, David Bogatin, ran away. So that was my experience with them, but it was very good. Talked about the the nights we had partying in Brighton Beach with lobsters piled this high in the club and the dancing girls and everything else. We had a lot of fun. They knew how to party. But, that was then. This is now. And hopefully you enjoyed what Joe had to say. Like I said, he knows it from the inside out. He's been there, was with the CIA in some capacity, whatever that title might have been. But we just try to bring on guests to give you insight into things that maybe you're not fully aware of. So hope you enjoyed it. And anything else I have to say, hit me up on TikTok. I got a TikTok platform now. And don't forget the cruise. We're going to put a link in here for the cruise for next year. Franzese Family Cruise. It's going to be great. A Caribbean cruise on a terrific ship. It's a Norwegian cruise line, one of their newest ships, the Aqua, I think it's called. Beautiful. We got all that information there. I'm looking forward to spending time with you. We got great cabins set aside for everybody. But go in there and see if it's of interest to you. Some of you that have been contacting me are saying you want to come. We're going to spend a good week together. And we got a lot of activities planned together. So if you're interested in the cruise, jump on the link and take it from there. My friends, how do I always leave you? Same way, never going to change. Be safe. You know the deal. Don't have to get into it heavily. I've been doing it ad nauseum. I know that, but I'm concerned, especially about the women. Be healthy. Got a lot of stuff, people. You keep asking me, Michael, how do you look good for 75. Well, let me tell you something. I don't work hard at it, but I work at it. I'm surrounded by people that take care of themselves. I put the right foods in my stomach and I exercise a little bit. And I've got some things. They have some incredible things on the market now that we're going to continue to talk about that help you. Longevity, they help you. I won't present it to you unless I really believe in them. So be healthy, man, and watch what I have to say because I'm really doing it for your benefit. Hey, if we can live to 100, why not? Let's try, right? And I think with the help of these things that I'm going to show you, you can do that. And I've been bringing them out there a little bit at a time. But that's it. So be safe, be healthy, and yes, I mean this, people. God bless each and every one of you, your families, friends, and neighborhoods. And listen, I said this in the beginning. Ministry Monday. If you're into that and you want me to share the gospel with you in my own way, I do it a little differently. I'm not a preacher. I am considered to be an evangelist because I've been speaking the gospel and my story all over the world for 30 years now. But I want to share more with you because I really am concerned about your spiritual health. Okay? God bless each and every one of you. God bless America. 250-year anniversary coming up. And yes, it's exciting for us. Just a big deal. So I'll see you next time. Take care.